Hello, everyone. Welcome to the English Vault. Today, we follow Fannie Lou Hamer, a woman whose voice carried the weight of poverty, racism, pain, faith, and unbreakable truth. Her story is not about power given freely. It is about a person standing up in a system built to keep her quiet and saying, with a tired body but a clear soul, I am here. Chapter 1. Born into a Hard Country. Fannie Lou Hamer was born in Mississippi in 1917, the youngest of 20 children in a family of sharecroppers. Her early life was marked by poverty, labor, and a racial system that controlled almost every part of black life in the American South. As a child, she worked in cotton fields. Childhood did not mean safety and play in the way many people imagine it. It meant long days, difficult conditions, and learning early that survival could require strength before a person was old enough to fully understand injustice. Fannie Lou grew up in a world where the law and local custom often worked together to limit black citizens. Voting rights existed on paper, but violence, intimidation, literacy tests, economic punishment, and fear kept many people away from the ballot box. The system wanted obedience, and it punished people who challenged it. Yet inside that world, Fannie Lou developed a strong moral center. She had faith, humor, memory, and a voice shaped by church, field work, family, and suffering. She knew the sound of exhaustion, but she also knew the sound of a song rising from people who refused to lose themselves. Her education was limited by the conditions around her, but intelligence was never absent. She could read people, remember stories, understand power, and speak with a clarity that did not need academic decoration. The world often confuses formal opportunity with ability. Fannie Lou's life exposes that mistake. She also understood community. In places where resources were scarce, people survived through networks of care, prayer, food, warning, and shared memory. That community life helped shape her leadership. She did not speak as an isolated individual trying to become famous. She spoke as someone carrying the pain and hope of many people beside her. This is important because later, when she spoke to national audiences, she did not sound like someone performing courage. She sounded like someone who had paid for every word. Her authority came from lived experience, not from a title. Chapter 2. The Day She Learned She Could Try to Vote. For much of her life, Fannie Lou Hamer did not know that she had a constitutional right to vote. That fact alone reveals the cruelty of voter suppression. A right hidden from the people who need it is not fully alive. In 1962, she attended a meeting organized by civil rights workers. There, she learned that black citizens had the right to register and vote. The idea changed her life immediately. She later remembered wondering why nobody had told her before. That question carries deep pain. Imagine discovering, as an adult, that a power had been yours in law but denied to you in practice. Imagine realizing that the silence around your rights was not accidental. It was part of the control. Fannie Lou decided to act. She joined others traveling to the courthouse in Indianola, Mississippi, to try to register. This was not a simple paperwork errand. It was dangerous. People could lose jobs, homes, safety, and even their lives for trying to participate in democracy. That trip required a kind of courage that can be difficult to understand from a distance. The courthouse was not only a building. It represented a system that had told generations of black citizens to stay away from power. To walk toward it was to challenge a whole structure of fear. When she returned, she was fired from the plantation where she worked. The punishment was immediate and personal. The message was clear. If you try to claim your citizenship, you may lose your livelihood. Many people would have stepped back. Fannie Lou stepped forward. Her decision marked the beginning of a new life. She had been poor before, but now she became politically dangerous to those who depended on her silence. That danger did not come from wealth or weapons. It came from a woman understanding her own citizenship. When people who have been pushed down begin to stand together, even a courthouse form can become a challenge to an entire social order. Chapter 3. A Voice Made Stronger by Pressure. Fannie Lou Hamer began working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, often called SNCC, and became a powerful organizer. She helped people register to vote, spoke at meetings, sang freedom songs, and encouraged others to overcome fear. Her voice was one of her greatest tools. It was not polished in the traditional political sense. It was direct, emotional, spiritual, and honest. When she spoke, people could hear the fields, the church, the kitchen table, the jail cell, and the long road of Black Southern life. That honesty made her powerful. Many politicians used careful language to hide hard truths. Fannie Lou used plain language to reveal them. She could explain voter suppression in a way that nobody could pretend was abstract. She made the issue human. Organizing required courage every day. It meant knocking on doors where people were afraid. It meant entering communities watched by hostile authorities. It meant telling neighbors that fear was real, but citizenship was real too. It also required patience. One conversation rarely changes a life. People had reasons to be afraid. They had seen what happened to those who challenged the system. Fannie Lou had to honor that fear, while also inviting people beyond it. She could not simply command bravery. She had to help people believe they were not alone. She did not ask people to be fearless. She understood fear too well for that. Instead, she helped people act with fear present. That is a different kind of bravery. It does not pretend danger is imaginary. It says danger is real, and dignity is real too. As her work grew, so did the resistance against her. The more clearly she spoke, the more some people wanted her punished. But pressure did not erase her voice. It sharpened it. Every meeting, every song, every registration attempt became part of a larger education. Fannie Lou was teaching people that politics was not something far away. It was the road, the job, the school, the doctor, the sheriff, the courthouse, and the right to be counted. Chapter 4. Pain that did not silence her. In 1963, Fannie Lou Hamer and other activists were arrested in Winona, Mississippi, after returning from a voter education workshop. While in custody, she was brutally beaten. The injuries affected her for the rest of her life. This part of her story must be told with care. The violence was real and severe, but the point is not to turn her suffering into spectacle. The point is to understand the price she paid for basic democratic rights and the courage required to continue afterward. After the beating, Fannie Lou lived with pain. Her body carried evidence of the system she opposed. But the violence did not achieve what it intended. It did not make her disappear. It did not make her forget. It did not make her accept silence as safety. Her testimony about what happened became part of her moral power. She could speak not as a distant observer, but as someone whose body had been used as a warning to others. And still, she spoke. This is why her voice carried such force. It was not theory. It was not a slogan floating above reality. When Fannie Lou described injustice, she was not borrowing pain for effect. She was telling what had happened, and what continued to happen to people who were treated as if their citizenship could be denied by intimidation. There is a profound difference between being unhurt and being unbroken. Fannie Lou Hamer was hurt. She was deeply hurt. But she was not broken in the way her attackers intended. Her courage did not come from avoiding pain. It came from refusing to let pain decide the limits of her voice. That refusal would soon reach the national stage. Chapter 5. The Speech America Tried Not to Hear. In 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer helped form the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. The goal was to challenge the all-white Mississippi delegation at the Democratic National Convention and expose the reality that black citizens in Mississippi were being denied meaningful political participation. At the convention, Fannie Lou gave televised testimony before the Credentials Committee. She told the country what had happened to her and why black Mississippians were demanding representation. Her words were calm, direct, and devastating. President Lyndon Johnson, worried about the political impact, called an emergency press conference during her testimony, which interrupted live network coverage. But the attempt to move attention away from her did not erase her. News programs replayed her testimony later, and many Americans heard her voice. Her most famous question cut through the language of political compromise. "Is this America?" It was not a slogan for decoration. It was a moral challenge. If the nation claimed democracy, what did it mean when citizens were punished for trying to vote? The power of that question was its simplicity. It did not require a legal textbook to understand. It asked the country to look at the distance between its promises and its practices. It asked listeners to decide whether democracy was only an image or a responsibility. Fannie Lou's testimony showed the power of plain truth in a room full of strategy. She did not have to sound like the people who held office. She sounded like the people those offices were supposed to serve. The immediate political result was imperfect and painful. The Freedom Democratic Party did not receive the full recognition it sought. But the testimony changed public understanding. Fannie Lou had carried Mississippi's hidden truth into the national conscience. Even when institutions moved slowly, the moral record had changed. Her words remained available for anyone willing to listen. They became evidence against denial, and they helped make private suffering part of public responsibility. Chapter 6. More Than a Moment. Fannie Lou Hamer's activism did not end with one famous speech. She continued organizing, running for office, building community programs, and fighting poverty. She understood that voting rights were essential, but not the only struggle. Political power mattered because daily life mattered. Food, land, health, education, and economic dignity were all connected. A person cannot fully participate in democracy while trapped by hunger and fear. Fannie Lou saw this connection clearly. She helped create the Freedom Farm Cooperative, an effort to support black farmers and poor families through land, food production, and economic cooperation. This work showed another side of her vision. She was not only resisting injustice, she was trying to build alternatives. The cooperative mattered because hunger is political too. If a family cannot eat, freedom remains incomplete. If people can be controlled through jobs, land, and credit, then voting rights alone cannot carry the full weight of liberation. Fannie Lou understood that dignity had to become practical. She knew that ballots and bread belonged in the same conversation. A voice in politics matters more when the person using it can also survive the week, feed a child, and stand without begging for permission. That matters because movements need both protest and construction. Protest says, "This is wrong." Construction says, "Here is what life could become." Fannie Lou Hamer carried both messages. She challenged power, and she helped feed people. Her health suffered. Her body had endured poverty, hard labor, violence, and the strain of constant activism. But she continued as long as she could. She did not separate public justice from everyday survival. For her, freedom had to reach the kitchen, the field, the doctor's office, and the ballot box. This made her leadership deeply practical. She did not speak about democracy as a beautiful word floating above life. She brought it down to the ground, where people lived. That practical vision is one reason her leadership still matters. She understood that a person cannot eat a promise, cannot pay rent with a patriotic speech, and cannot heal a wound with a slogan. Freedom had to become food, shelter, safety, voice, and land under people's feet. For her, justice had to touch the table. It had to arrive where life was actually lived, every day. Chapter 7. Sick and Tired. Fannie Lou Hamer is often remembered for saying she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. The phrase became powerful because it held both exhaustion and refusal. It did not hide fatigue. It turned fatigue into truth. Many people are taught that strength means never admitting tiredness. Fannie Lou showed another kind of strength. She admitted the burden and still moved. She did not pretend the struggle was easy. She made the cost visible. Her voice carried people because it was honest about suffering without surrendering to it. She could speak of pain, sing through fear, laugh in hard rooms, and confront leaders who preferred polite distance from injustice. That honesty gave others permission to stop pretending too. In movements, truth can move from one mouth to many. One person says what others have been carrying silently, and suddenly the room has a new kind of strength. There was also a spiritual dimension to her courage. Songs were not decoration in the movement. They helped people breathe together. They helped fear become shared instead of private. When Fannie Lou sang, she was not only performing music, she was helping people remember they were not alone. That memory of shared strength was essential. Systems of oppression often try to isolate people, making each person feel small and exposed. Songs did the opposite. They gathered voices. They turned one person's fear into a room's determination. Fannie Lou knew how to use that power without making it artificial. Her life teaches that dignity is not granted by institutions. It is lived, defended, and sometimes sung into the air before the law fully recognizes it. She had been denied formal power for much of her life, but she possessed moral power that many officials could not match. That is why her story still cuts through time. It asks whether a democracy is real only in speeches, or whether it is real in the lives of the people most often pushed aside. Chapter 8. The Voice They Could Not Silence. Fannie Lou Hamer died in 1977, but her voice did not disappear. It remains in recordings, histories, speeches, songs, and the memory of movements that continued after her. She became one of the clearest moral voices of the civil rights struggle. Her story is inspiring because she did not begin with the advantages that the world usually associates with leadership. She was poor. She had limited formal education. She lived under racial oppression. She carried pain. But none of that prevented her from becoming a force. In fact, those experiences helped shape the truth she told. She understood injustice from the inside. She knew what policies meant when they reached a human body, a family, a paycheck, a field, a hospital, or a courthouse door. That is why her biography still feels urgent. It reminds us that democracy is not measured only by documents. It is measured by access, safety, representation, and whether the most vulnerable people can speak without being punished for telling the truth. The world tried to make her small. Poverty tried, racism tried, violence tried, political strategy tried. But her voice kept widening. It moved from Mississippi fields to national television, from local meetings to history, from one woman's pain to a country's conscience. Fannie Lou Hamer reminds us that courage is not always clean, comfortable, or celebrated in the moment. Sometimes courage is a tired person standing up again. Sometimes it is a voice shaking but still clear. Sometimes it is the decision to tell the truth when powerful people would rather change the subject. Her courage also reminds us that history is not only made by people who are invited into the room. Sometimes history is made by people who arrive unwanted, speak plainly, and force the room to reveal what it has been avoiding. So when we remember her, we remember the force of a citizen who refused to be erased. We remember that democracy is not only protected by famous leaders and high offices, it is protected by ordinary people who insist that their lives count. Keep listening, keep building your English, and keep remembering that a clear voice can become stronger than the systems built to silence it.